Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. We are going to start our presentation on the Community Development Block Grant and Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Workshop. Just to get started, we're going to go ahead and mute everyone for now and then have everyone's cameras off, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you again for coming. I'm Christine Fales. I'm a housing analyst with the City of Roseville, and I administer our CDBG grant. Also with us today, we have Susanna Krell, who will be presenting on the HPRR, the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Fund. Okay, so this meeting is being recorded, just so everyone is aware. And as we are going through the presentations, as we mentioned, we'll, have our cameras off and be muted. But if you have any questions, you can either click on the raise your hand icon on the taskbar, or feel free to type your question in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And you can do so at any time. You can type your question in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand at any time as well. And then lastly, we're just going to ask everyone to please post your name and email address in the chat so we can have a record of who attended. That would be very helpful. So when you get a chance, if you don't mind doing that. All right. So first off, just a little review of what our agenda is. So we're going to review what is CDBG, talk about the consolidated plan and what that is. Then we'll have a little time to discuss community needs, go over any comments or questions. Then we'll switch over to homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. After that, we'll talk about the application process, requirements, and review. Program your schedule. Again, open up for more questions if there are any. And then at the very end, if we have anyone who's never used Zoom grants before and wants some pointers, we have another slideshow that we can share at the end. So if you are interested, you can stay on for that. So first off, we're going to start with a poll question to get a better idea of who we have present with us today. You can either use your phone and scan that QR code and then take the poll from your phone, or you can click on the link that will be posted in the chat in just a moment and then take the poll that way. So we're just going to give you guys just a moment to do the poll. Okay, so I'll go ahead and share the results now. Okay, so we have 11% live in Roseville, some work in Roseville. We have affordable housing providers and some social services providers. And then a big chunk of people are here between the age of 18 and 64. Right. Let's switch back over to the presentation. Certainly they're on screen. Good. Okay. All right. So thank you for answering that. And then next we have CDBG overview. So CDBG is also known as the Community Development Block Grant. It's a federal program administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The purpose of the program is to reduce poverty and its effects and develop viable communities by providing decent, safe, and sanitary housing, providing a suitable living environment, expanding economic opportunities. The program promotes affordable housing and community development programs for low-income residents. So next we have who is eligible to apply. So those eligible to apply include city departments, nonprofit organizations, governmental agencies that are independent of the city of Roseville, and for-profit entities that are authorized under federal code. Those who are awarded funds are known as subrecipients. All programs that receive CDBG funding must meet one of the HUD national objectives. The national objectives of the grant are to benefit low and moderate income persons and our households, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and or meet an urgent community need that threatens the health or welfare of residents. This final objective is rarely used and is generally associated with disasters. All right, so now we're going to review a little bit about how CDBG funds can be used. So first off, each activity must meet one of the national objectives that we just stated on the previous slide. Funds must serve low and moderate income residents, and so residents served must have a household income that is equal to or less than 80% of the area's household median income for that household size. As of April 1st, 2024, the HUD income limits for a 4-person household in Placer County is $94,300. And in case you would like to take a look at the HUD income limits on the HUD's website, we will post a link in the chat. Next, there are some groups that are presumed by HUD to be made up of principally low and moderate income persons, which include abused children, elderly persons, battered spouses, homeless persons, adults meeting the Bureau of Census's definition of severely disabled, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farm workers. All right, so in this slide, we will discuss what activities are eligible for CDBG funding. So this is a list of activities that may include these, but they're not limited to. So this includes accessibility improvements for persons with disabilities, acquisition of real property, relocation and demolition, rehabilitation of residential and non-residential structures, construction of public facilities and improvements. And this would include things like water and sewer facilities, streets, neighborhood centers. There's public services within certain limits, energy efficiency improvements, provision of assistance to profit-motivated businesses to carry out economic development and job creation or retention activities. The CDBG regulations regarding eligible activities can be found in the Code of Federal Regulations at 24 CFR 570, 201, 202, or 203. So Suzanne will go ahead and post a link to the CDBG portion of the CFR in the chat for reference. All right, so eligible or allowed costs under the CDBG program must be directly related to the provision of services. So here are some examples of public service activities that could be personnel or staff, salary and benefits. The salaries must be only for persons involved in direct client services, and also public services funding cannot be used for administrative costs. Another example is office or facility rental or lease costs, materials and supplies, communications, or travel and mileage. At least 51% of program beneficiaries must be low or moderate income for public service activities. Next, there are a few examples of public facility or capital improvement projects, such as property acquisition, or rehabilitation, construction costs, or architecture and engineering. And these public facilities must guarantee at least 51% low and moderate income benefit. And then what costs are ineligible? So various costs are ineligible for CDBG funding. Generally, the following types of activities are ineligible. That would be most activities that do not primarily serve low and moderate income individuals or households, programs or services that promote religion, political activities, marketing, incentives, or fundraising, payment of debt or expenses incurred prior to the agreement date, which would be July 1, 2025 is when our program year starts, next program year. Entertainment, furnishings, or personal property, equipment purchase, which there are some exceptions to that. Construction of new housing. So funds cannot be used for actual construction, but acquisition of land or property with existing structures to be used to develop affordable housing would be eligible. And then again, if you want to check in the CFR, the link that Suzanne posted, you would find the ineligible activities located at part 570, part 207. So it should be in that same link. All right, public service activities. So listed here are some examples of types of programs that fall under the public service activities category. Additional examples besides the one listed here may include temporary rent or utility assistance for individuals, Meals on Wheels programs, and emergency overnight shelter operations. To utilize CDBG funds for a public service, the service must either be a new service or an expansion of an existing service. So, for example, you're either serving more people or providing additional services with the CDBG funds. And then for the cap on public service activities, so there's a minimum ask of $10,000 up to a maximum of $25,000 per activity. This increase to $25,000 began last year. The city for a long time had a maximum ask of $15,000 on the public services activities. And then lastly, the public service activities category cannot exceed 15% of the total grant awarded to the city. So it is a pretty small portion that can be used towards public service activities. We'll go over those numbers a little more too. Okay, and then public facilities and improvements projects. So public facilities serving low-income persons or neighborhoods are another eligible activity for CDBG funding. So again, this can include things like infrastructure improvements, like streets, curbs, and water and sewer lines, neighborhood facilities, such as public schools, libraries, parks, playgrounds, or facilities for persons with special needs, such as facilities for the homeless or domestic violence shelters, nursing homes, or group homes for the disabled. Let's see, acquisition, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and installation of public facilities and improvements are eligible activities. So in the past, public facilities activities that have been funded by Roseville include HVAC replacement at a shelter, funding for repairs for a home for permanent supportive housing, and conversion of a community room into a community kitchen, a shelter as well. In general, public facilities and public improvements include all facilities and improvements that are publicly owned or that are owned by a nonprofit and open to the general public. So if the assisted facility is owned by a nonprofit, the CDBG regulations stipulate that the facility must be open to the public during normal working hours. There's no minimum or maximum ask on public facilities, but note that funding will be dependent on our grant award and any carryover funds that we may have available. So since public service activities are limited to 15% of the annual grant, which we discussed previously, the majority of funds can be, used towards types of public facility type projects. So if you know of a type of activity that would fall under this category, please feel free to apply for that. Okay, so acquisition. So applications can be submitted for things like acquisition of existing rental housing, acquisition and rehab of existing property, or acquisition of a facility to be used for transitional housing. An affordable housing project must be developed and occupied within a 4-year period from commitment date. And note that acquisition by a private for-profit entity is not eligible under the CFR Part 570. If you're considering an acquisition project, you must contact staff to find out if it's eligible. And if you do complete the initial application in Zoom grants, we would be reaching out to you at a later date to submit additional information, because the Zoom grants doesn't have, everything that we would need for acquisition type projects. Okay, we're going to take a brief moment to talk about CDBG CV funds, which are from the CARES Act from the coronavirus. So we have a very small amount of these CV specific funds remaining. We have $15,000 available to receive applications. So this was the program that was to be used specifically to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. And so the CV grant is subject to the same rules and regulations of the annual CDBG program grants. And so, if anyone has a program that you are running that would be eligible still for the CV funds, please, feel free to apply. That's a specific category you would select on the application. So just to discuss a few of the types of activities eligible for CV funding, just remember that all these activities with the CV funding must be directly related to preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID. So just examples of some of the ways that the city used the CV funds that we had received previously. We used towards a couple emergency rental assistance programs. We funded a fair housing services provider, provided support for Project Room Key, after school care for homeless students. And then we also ran a small business loan program to support local business owners. And lastly, there was a shelter in place program for homeless individuals at the height of the pandemic that was funded. So again, if you have an activity that you think would be eligible for CV funds, please feel free to apply for that 15,000 or whatever, less than that you might have in mind. Okay, so here we have just a list of some of the requirements for CDBG sub-recipients that must be followed when you receive CDBG funding. So first of all, the subrecipient must track eligibility of program recipients. This includes a submission of quarterly reports on your activity. The reports will require income and household characteristics of the CDBG beneficiaries. These reports are required and are completed in Zoom grants, which is the program where you will apply, and then all the reporting is done through there as well. All costs must be documented and will be provided as a backup to invoices. Invoices are also submitted through Zoom grants. Note that all costs are paid on a reimbursement basis, and the request for reimbursement cannot be paid until the associated quarterly report is submitted and reviewed. Funds may only be used for persons residing within the city of Roseville limits. We cannot provide funding for the unincorporated areas of Roseville. All organizations applying for funding must have a non-discriminatory policy for membership and access to services. All organizations must also have what's called a unique entity identifier number, which we will talk about in an upcoming slide. Additionally, there are various procurement procedures depending on your activity. So if you have a construction project, there are specific procurement procedures that must be followed based on your project. For example, projects may require the payment of prevailing wages, permitting costs, public noticing costs, and contingency costs. The city utilizes a consultant who's involved in CDBG construction projects and will assist with the labor compliance side of things. These procedures vary by project, so this can be discussed further on an individual basis if you have a project in mind. Next, we will post a link in the chat for a helpful guidebook made by HUD called A Handbook for CDBG Subrecipients on Administrative Systems. And this can help applicants understand the administrative requirements that apply to the use of federal funds for the delivery of the CDBG programs and activities. Excuse me. Okay, next we're going to briefly discuss the CDBG Consolidated Plan and what that is. So the CDBG Consolidated Plan, or we call it CON Plan for short, is designed to help states and local jurisdictions assess their affordable housing and community development needs and market conditions, and to make data-driven, place-based investment decisions. So as a grantee of CDBG funds, the city is obligated to develop a 5-year consolidated plan that analyzes the needs of low-income residents and neighborhoods, identifies available resources, outlines strategies to address concerns, and sets goals for the plan period. The most recent consolidated plan was adopted in 2020. Currently, the city is working on developing the 2025 through 2029 consolidated plan. So far, the process has involved a community needs survey, community meetings, and consultation with service providers. So priority needs are set based on the results from those surveys, meetings, and consultations. Priority needs are assigned based on the level of need, also demonstrated by the data collected in the market analysis and the needs assessment, the citizen participation project, and the availability of resources to address those needs. So then the consolidated plan is carried out through annual action plans, which provide a concise summary of the actions, activities, and specific federal and non-federal resources that will be used each year to address the priority needs and specific goals identified by the CON plan. So again, the data gathered from the community survey, meetings, consultations, as well as this meeting will help guide the goals and priority needs that will be part of the 2025 consolidated plan. Okay, and so for the 2025 CON plan, I forgot to mention that we have Louise Collis here, who she is one of our consultants that's helping in putting together our CON plan. And so far for the upcoming plan, there have been several high and low priority needs that have been identified through the survey, meetings, and consultations. So high priority is one, shelter, housing, and services to address homelessness. So this will include things like emergency shelter, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and services for persons experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Number 2, affordable rental housing. So this will include things like acquisition or rehab of existing rental housing affordable to low and moderate income households. And then, I guess, as we stated before, please note that for housing, new construction is not an eligible CDBG cost. And then third, housing for persons with disabilities. It came up as a high priority. Okay, and then there are also low priority needs, which, to note, low priority does not mean no priority. It just means they're not the highest priority. HUD doesn't distinguish further than high or low. So that's how we have to categorize the goals or needs. So one of the low priority needs is services for seniors and persons with disabilities, services for low and moderate income youth, fair housing services, maintaining existing homeowner housing stock, and services for sexual assault and domestic violence victims. Okay, so now we would like to hear what you all think are the most significant needs for lower income residents of Roseville. We again are going to post this poll question in the chat, and please select up to 3 responses in response to this question. Again, you can scan the QR code or follow the link in the chat, and we'll give you a couple minutes to reply and then share the results.
Share screen.
Yeah.
I'm trying to change it to share.
Okay. Well.
Mhm.
Okay, so far we have some responses. We have programs and housing for persons experiencing homelessness is coming up with high, and rental deposit utility assistance is matched up with affordable housing for seniors. Okay. And infrastructure and public facilities. Nobody really thinks are. Okay. Thank you everyone for your replies. And if you're still finishing that up, feel free to still submit it because we will have those, results still. Okay. And so now just want to open it up for discussion. If anyone wants to, has anything they want to share in regards to this, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat. If you want, again, to share anything about your response or anything else you want to discuss in regards to the community needs. And then also feel free, if there's anything you want to share but don't wish to do so in the meeting, feel free to contact us directly and share your thoughts. And we'll have that contact information listed on the final slide of the presentation. So if we see any hands or anybody that has anything to say in the chat.
I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Well, we will go ahead and move on again, and we can give a moment at the end too if anyone wants to share. Okay, so now we are going to share about our funding estimates. So based on prior year funding, we're estimating the 25-26 grant to be of roughly $700,000. We may have additional prior year program funds that will be available to expend, which would be calculated and determined as the new program year approaches. So of the total grant the city receives in CDBG, 20% goes towards administration, which is the maximum allowed for administrative costs. The amount of CDBG funds used for public services, again, cannot exceed 15% of the total grant awarded to the city. So we're estimated public services to be around $105,000 maximum. And please remember, again, that each public service program or activity is currently limited to $25,000 maximum per program. Lastly, the remaining funding after the 20% cost for admin and the 15% for public services can go towards things like improvements, rehabilitation of homes for low-income homeowners, and public facility type activities. So it's estimated that there will be around $455,000 towards those sorts of activities. And please note that allocations of public service related funds must be expended by the end of the program year, which for the next cycle would be June 30th, 2026. Okay, we're gonna again open it up for any questions or comments before we move on to Suzanne's portion of the presentation. Okay. Again, you can click the raise your hand or type your question or comment in the chat.
Okay.
And we'll go ahead and move on to our next section.
So hi, Suzanne here with Roseville Housing. We're going to talk about the portion of the application for homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. So activities here may include assisting residents who are actively experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness. This includes, but is not limited to, providing rapid rehousing, rental assistance, supportive case management services that allow people to obtain and retain housing, and operating and capital costs for navigation centers and emergency shelters. Although you will use the same application process as CDBG, a separate application is required for homeless prevention rapid rehousing funds. So some of you may be submitting 2 applications in Zoom grants if you're applying for both CDBG and HPRR. The funds must be used to provide services within the city limits of both Roseville and Rockland. So Christine was talking about CDBG, which is just the Roseville, and homeless prevention rapid rehousing that we're talking about here is both Roseville and Rockland. At most, we'll have about $620,000 to be available. The minimum award here is $25,000 per program, and there is no maximum at this time. Homeless prevention rapid rehousing funds, the sources include the low and moderate income fund, and also funding from the state's permanent local housing allocation program, we call PLHA. So Roseville will receive PLHA funds to administer for both Roseville and Rockland. The state has not yet provided the exact dollar amounts, but the estimates are shown here. For the current program year, so 24-25, it was about $255,000 for Roseville and about $109,600 for Rockland. If your agency is granted PLHA funds and it includes Rockland, it's imperative to serve Rockland families or we do risk losing that funding. So that's going to be important to show on your report outs. All right. In order to receive PLHA funding, applicants must serve households earning no more than 30% of area median income, as well as provide assistance in a manner consistent with the Housing First practices in the sections that are listed here. Applicants who program do not comply with Housing First practices will only be eligible to apply for the low mod funding. If any applicants need help defining Housing First practices, please let us know. As Christine said, our contact will be in the final slide. All right, so the 2025-2026 funding cycle begins July 1 and ends on June 30th. So July 1, 25 through June 30th, 26. Reporting will be biannual with reports beginning 7/1, ending 12/31, and then also beginning January 1, ending June 30th. That first report is due about a month after the closing. As you can see from December 31 due on Feb 1. The second one, as those of you have participated in before, is due a little bit quicker of a turnaround, and that's because of the reporting that's due from the city to the state. So we have a little bit shorter time frame there. All right, so that concludes my section on homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. Let's talk about application requirements. All right, so applications for both CDBG and HPRR funding opened in Zoom grants 2 days ago, Monday, December 2nd. Pre-applications for CDBG and HPRR funding will be required and must be submitted by December 20th. So that's a little bit new this year. Applicants must complete a pre-application questionnaire, which must be approved by staff before continuing with their full application. Pre-apps will be reviewed by us and will be approved or declined no later than January 6th of 2025. The process of submitting the pre-app for review before continuing with the full app assists with making sure applications are moving in the right direction when they're submitted. So the full application is due in Zoom Grants by January 31st. There are a couple of requirements that are necessary to input into both the CDBG and the HPRR applications. We'll need your tax ID number and UEI number. If you already have a UEI number, you can include that in your application. If you do not have one at the time that you apply, you will need to obtain one and provide it as a condition of receiving funding. The next slide will provide more detail on the UEI number. In 2022, the unique entity identifier used across the federal government changed from DUNS, we used to call it a DUNS number, to the unique entity ID, and this is generated by sam.gov. The DUNS number is now removed, and registration, searching, and data now require the UEI. Existing registered entities can find their UEI number by utilizing the link listed above, while new entities can get theirs at sam.gov. Registration may need to be completed. If you have questions on how to obtain a UEI number, please let us know and we'll provide you with additional guidance. And I think we actually have some links that we can put in the chat.
Yes, two were just posted.
Thank you. All right, for CDBG and HPRR, overall, the applications are reviewed and ranked based on this listed criteria. Okay, you, your staff, your clients are welcome to attend the City Council meeting late April or early May. We're still determining that date in support of CDBG and homeless prevention rapid rehousing programs. You can see the schedule here, or the tentative schedule here. All right, and then like I mentioned just a bit ago, we have pre-applications open right now. Full applications will open after that and are due January 31st. Okay, so a few tips based on previous years regarding the Zoom Grants application that we want to share with you. So some of you may have experienced this. The application only auto-saves if you click outside of the box where you're typing. If you're copying and pasting like from Microsoft Word and pasting into Zoom Grants, make sure you select paste as plain text. Multiple people can work on same application at the same time, so y'all can be logged into Zoom Grants at the same time, just not in the exact same question at the same time. And then email address contact. Helpful if there are staff changes to having a shared email address as the main contact for the application. So for example, instead of if Christine were applying, which she's not, but if Christine were applying, instead of providing her email address with her name at roseville.ca.us, we could use our general housing inbox, housing@roseville.ca.us. Collaborator account is limited. Per Zoom Grant support, it's best to have a single set of shared credentials and shared access to an email account to assure the organization has access to the account and email sent by Zoom Grants. Like, for example, if your pre-application is approved and we want you to move on to a full application.
Yeah.
The link to the city's Zoom Grant landing page just got posted in the chat. Handwritten or printed applications will actually not be accepted. It's only through Zoom grants. And if you're having any trouble opening or filling out the application, you're welcome to give us a call or email, either us or Zoom grants. Any questions?
I see one in the chat from a bit ago. Beth asked, is there a space for collaboration? Yes, when you submit even the pre-application, you'll see a question about, yeah, that's where you'll see the question if there's collaborating agencies, and then if so, you list how many and then list them there. Don't see any. Not seeing any other questions. If anyone wants to, again, raise your hand or type something in the chat, feel free.
Nothing? We've got a quiet group. You guys all know the drill, huh?
Well, next slide we'll post here's Suzanne's and my information. If you do have come up with any questions, feel free to email us or call us. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if there's anyone that's new to Zoom grants and wants to get any more information about, using the website and whatnot, I have a couple documents I can share with you. So you are welcome to either stay on for a moment and I can do that, or I can send you that information via email if you want to just post your, either email me or in the chat, you can just say, I want the Zoom grants application slides, please, and then I will send them to you. But that is the end of our presentation. So again, if anyone needs help with Zoom grants, let me know now or later. And otherwise, we are all done.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.